was 8 years old, the first time I had a significant loss in my life. My mother's grandfather died of cancer, and I remember it because my parents worked for the church and they were over in Jerusalem at the time. And then the next death that happened sort of changed my whole world. I was 15 years old. My aunt was teaching like a CPR class and hit some black ice, and her truck went front to back and she broke her neck. And she was 30 years old at the time, and my uncle, and I'll never forget the picture of my uncle, and they had 4 little boys. The oldest was 6 and the youngest was 9 months old. And actually my cousin that was the 9-month-old baby just got home from his mission last weekend, and it was pretty emotional to see him there. But I remember thinking, like, how tragic that was. And then fast forward a few more years, and when I was 19, my father's grandfather died of cancer, and I had moved in to help sort of take care of him. And that was a significant loss in my family. He was the patriarch of the Schultz family. And I thought at that point at 19 that I had seen a lot of death. And then 2 months later, on July 24th, 1999, at 19 years old, I remember speaking to my brother Grant, who was 15 at the time, in the morning. No big deal, right? And then hours later in the evening, standing right down by Riverwoods, there's like a canal, an Orem-Provo canal, waiting for the rescuers to find my brother's body. So my brother had drowned, and I remember standing there thinking, like, I don't know what's true. I don't know if the church is true. I couldn't fathom that kind of a loss. And I think all of you in this room can sort of relate to that kind of a loss, the kind of loss that makes you stand on the brink and question everything that you thought that you knew was true. Is resurrection really true? Are families really forever? And some of the basic things that I thought, man, I have a strong testimony of that. I was getting ready to do a study abroad, and I wanted to serve a mission. And I think this is the kind of loss that most people talk about. And that's actually not the kind of loss that I want to talk about today. Today I want to talk about a couple different losses that I think we feel, that we don't really grieve and that we don't really talk about, but that we all go through, and why it's important to recognize them and validate them and make something out of them. So these quotes are coming from one of my favorite books called Making Loss Matter by Rabbi David Wolpe. And so we'll start with home. The loss of home. You can't go home again, not because home is no longer the same, but because you are no longer the same. The loss of love. To love is to accept the responsibility of suffering. The loss of dreams. If we are strong enough, we see that when a dream vanishes, it leaves wisdom in its wake. And the loss of self. It is when we seek above ourselves, beyond ourselves, that we most truly find ourselves. So I think there's a whole bunch of other losses, but I think especially to this demographic and in my personal life and the lives of others, I think these are huge losses that we don't really talk about or recognize in our lives. So I'm going to start with the first one, which is probably the most applicable, I feel like, to the Zytox, the loss of home. So what happens when you feel like you no longer belong to something or someplace that you've always been a part of, right? So when I want to talk about loss of home, I think most people think of home as like this, right? The house, the place that you grew up. And I actually want to shift your focus to think about maybe the church as like your belonging place, right? The place that you grew up or that you joined the church in. And for, I think, mid-singles, this shifts. I think there's this big shift when you sort of age out of the CES, right? Even the older CES, or when you age out of the singles ward and you're in a family ward, and all of a sudden these walls that you sort of could test around and sort of put your activities around are gone, and all of a sudden you feel not as safe. As a therapist, this is something that I see over and over again, right? The smaller the walls, the smaller the boundaries, the easier it is for people to feel safe. And so there's this, how does it happen that one day you feel that you're on the outside of your home and you're looking in, right? This whole idea about like, wait, how did I get here? And you can apply that to your daily life too. I'm the oldest of 8 children. And sometimes I go home. I have a sister that's 18 years younger than me, so she's 16 right now. And I think she knows nothing about me and what I've done, and I know very little about her. And somehow we're in the same family, but but we're in a totally different, we've been raised in totally different dynamics. And there's this, and it's important to understand that loss of home. And so the next loss that I think that we don't talk a ton about, we talk about love and romance, but we don't necessarily talk about this idea of loss of love. I love this quote by C.S. Lewis from the Four Loves. To love at all is to be vulnerable. Love anything and your heart will certainly be wrung and possibly broken. If you want to make sure of keeping it intact, you must give your heart to no one. Wrap it carefully around with hobbies and little luxuries. Avoid all entanglements. Lock it up safe in the casket or coffin of your selfishness. The alternative to tragedy, or at least the risk of tragedy, is damnation. The only place outside of heaven where you can be perfectly safe from all the dangers and perturbations of love is hell. So I have this kind of funny thing that I talk to my friends about called being negative single. And maybe you guys can relate to this. So you're single and you're living your life and you're doing your thing and you're going to work and you have your friends and you're okay. You have your bad days, but you're doing okay. Then you find somebody and now you're a two, right? Like we're a we. And we are doing things and we're going to parties and things and then you break up, right? So now you're single again, only you don't get to be regular single anymore because you have lost a lot of your friends and a lot of your activities, and so you get to be negative single, right? I call it like, it's no wonder nobody wants to sort of reach out and date for the fear of being negative single again, right? The loss of love, the loss of that safety is terrifying, so I'll stay in a relationship that I don't really know about, or I'll be comfortable in being regular single because being negative single is terrible, right? So when my brother died, one of the gifts he gave me, I feel like as far as making love, the loss of love matter, was he was here one day and he was gone the next. And it radically changed the way I think about people. I fear me dying one day and people not knowing what I feel about them. So I kind of make sure everybody knows that I love them, that they are valuable to me and why they're valuable to me. And I offer that as an invitation to you guys when you leave here today. Do people know how you feel about them? And not do you think they know, do they actually know? And so I think thinking about the loss of love is something that's really important for us. The next one is the loss of dreams. And I really like this. This also comes from Making Loss Matter. Dreams can be stimulants that propel a life. Repeated too often, unfulfilled or unrealistic, they can also be the intoxicants that shield one from living. And I'm a therapist by career, and I'm what's called a strength-based, solution-focused therapist. So I'm trying to find the strengths in the teenagers that I work with and bring areas that they're not doing well. And I work with a lot of kids who have substance abuse issues. So the words stimulants and intoxicants, right, in this quote really sort of are relatable to the work that I do. And I think about, if you think about dreams, they can be so empowering, right? They can move mountains in your life. I have a dream and I have a goal and I'm gonna do that, and they can do the exact same opposite, right? They can shatter your world. When I was 10 years old, I went to a BYU Young Ambassador performance with my dad, and I said, I'm going to be a YA. That's what I'm going to be. And I spent the next 4 years at BYU failing to be a BYU Young Ambassador. If you know anything about them, it's nearly impossible as a girl to be it. I mean, I remember talking to Randy Booth, and he said, you sound really good, and you dance really good, and your very best is just not enough. And it was earth-shattering to me because I did not have I was already on plan C, but I didn't think I needed to have plan, D, E, F, and here I am on plan, I don't even know, X right now. But this idea of dreams shattering in front of me, think about it. If you wanted to be a prima ballerina, or if you wanted to be a baseball star, at this point at our age, those dreams pretty much are unrealistic, right? So what do you do when your dreams and these things that sort of propelled you to get somewhere aren't fulfilled? And I think that's really important. I think we don't think about that a lot. Like how do we reestablish dreams in our lives? How do we create things, foundations like Zyrise or other things like that? How do we create spaces in our lives that make the dreams come alive again in us? And a few years ago, I moved to Arizona. I was going to grad school, and I was talking to one of my best friends, and we both really missed singing in college, singing at church. And so we thought, hey, why don't we start something? And so we started an organization called Inspire Music Service Hope. And it's just grown really big, and we have a studio now, and I'm really excited about it. But the idea of it started when a loss of my dream, being a young ambassador or being a Broadway singer, they weren't happening. And I thought, why don't I start where I am and start a foundation, start a nonprofit. And it's been one of the biggest blessings in my life to be able to be a part of something that didn't exist at all. So creating new dreams and being able to sort of figure out ways to find fulfillment in your life rather than just the loss of dreams that you had before. I don't know how often we really think about that and let our lives grieve. One more on that idea of dreams that I think is really pertinent to our demographic, the LDS mid-singles or singles, is what about the dreams that just your righteous desires that aren't met? I want to be a mother. I want to be a father. I just want to be in a good, healthy relationship. For some people, I want to have children. And I think these are the things that if we're too vulnerable about, we put them out there, they're just too painful to have, right? So we sort of stuff them into our hearts and we pretend that we're great and we have a career and we're doing this. And I want to say, as me, but also as a therapist, that there's something really powerful that comes from recognizing the loss of those dreams and being able to, kind of go to the Creator and have a conversation about, so what can I do now? So I think that's really important when it comes to dreams. The last one that I want to talk about is the loss of self. This idea of, and I used 3 lines from 3 different songs that I really love, hymns. The first one is from the hymn, Come Ye Disconsolate. Come ye disconsolate, where'er you languish. Come to the mercy seat, fervently kneel. Here bring your wounded hearts, here tell your anguish. Earth has no sorrow that heaven cannot cure. I love that. Here bring your wounded hearts, right? The ever famous, come thou fount of every blessing. Prone to wander, Lord, I feel it. Prone to leave the God I love. Here's my heart, oh, take and seal it. Seal it for thy courts above. Again, I love that. Here's my heart. You know better than I. I'm in anguish, and my dreams and my hopes are shattered. What can you do to help me? And the last one comes from a pretty popular hymn, but nobody ever sings this particular verse, and I love it. From Redeemer of Israel. Restore, my dear Savior, the light of thy face, thy soul cheering comfort impart, and let the sweet longing for thy holy place bring hope to my desolate heart. And so I just kind of, in talking about this idea of loss of self, I really want to talk about this idea of reinventing what we, I think, as LDS singles think of our place in the church. I've heard so many people say, I don't belong anymore. I'm sitting in my pew or Relief Society, and they're talking about families. I remember one particular Mother's Day, and I was sitting with my roommates, and tears were streaming down my face because I would have loved, there was some kid up that was right up the pew and crawling all over his mom, and she was frustrated, and Dad grabbed the kid and walked out, and I remember I remember crying and thinking, I'd give anything to be wrestling that kid right there in the pew. And you guys know what I'm talking about. The loss of I never thought I would be here. I never thought I would be 35 and single. And what do we do with that? Who do you talk to about that, right? And I want to invite you guys that is part of your story. Your loss that you go through is also part of who you become. And so on the very last slide, I want to talk about, it's really important that you make the loss in your life matter for yourself and for others around you. That you can choose to be a bitter, single, I don't fit in the church anymore, and that's fine. That's what you'll be. Or you can be somebody who chooses to dig in, build the kingdom, create and bring about change around you, and use the resources that you already have. I don't think that God expects any less of a single than of a mom and or a dad with kids that put their time and energy into each other. Does that make sense? I think we still have the same expectation to build the kingdom and to build those around us. It's one of the reasons why I'm really excited about the Zy Talks, is to spread the message that we, as singles in the church, have a lot to give each other and to give back. And this tree right here, just to conclude, this is the tree we planted the same week that my brother died. And you can see it when you drive by, I think it's like myfamily.com over by where he died. And it is huge and beautiful. It started really scrawny. It's weathered all the winters and all the storms. It's one of my favorite sanctuaries. It's the place I go instead of his grave, that I put flowers and I think about, and it's representative of hope for me. It's the embodiment to me of how you make loss matter. And I listed a bunch of other things, validate others, validate yourself, forgive more, tell people you love them, join a cause, be vulnerable, change laws if you need to. But I invite you guys to figure out how to make the losses that you're accumulating in your life really matter so that you can become a better person and give back. Thank you.